Okay, we're being recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today is the March 18th meeting of the Finance Committee. And seeing that we have a quorum, my first order, since we're doing this virtually, is to make sure the members of the committee can hear and we can hear them. So I will just call people out as I see their names on my screen. Bob?
Present.
Bernie?
Present.
Mandy?
Present.
Andy?
Present.
Tom?
Present.
And Alicia has not joined us yet, but we have a quorum. So I think we're ready to begin. And the way we've set up the agenda, Melissa can show the agenda if on the screen, but we have first public comments. There was a request to have those first. Then we have a presentation, discussion, and potential vote on the Community Preservation Act proposed projects. Then we have a discussion on the guidelines, at which point we will bring in Anna Devlin Gauthier, who's in the audience. And then we have our future agendas and meeting dates, including some critical decisions that we need to be talking about that are related to the budget. So that is the plan for the day. And I think we can get through all of that in the time allotted to us. Andy asked if we have a few minutes. He has an announcement, some information to give us that would be under the 48-hour rule. And we'll see if we have time for that. So I think I rattled off the agenda really quickly, but they're really just the three main items: CPAC, guidelines, and our own schedule. So I am going to open it for public comments.
Yeah.
So anyone in the audience who would like to make a comment, these are up to 3 minutes, and we will not be having a discussion off of them. We will be listening. So raise your hand if you would like to make a public comment. No hands went up. So I think we are ready to start with Community Preservation Act, if that team is ready to start.
I can pull up the appropriation order if you like.
I think that would be fine. I know the council got these and I had time to look at them. So Tom and Bernie, if they had time to look at the packet, so we can discuss. It's just without people to respond. If we have any questions about the projects, Amy is here for at least one of them, and I'm not sure who would handle our questions. Or we could start with one of the other topics. We could reverse the order. Mandy, whoops.
I was just going to say my questions actually relate to DPW issues. So I think we've got the people there for the questions I have.
Okay, so why don't we, Melissa, why don't you put up on the screen the larger, the thing that shows the list of projects, and then Mandy's going to focus on one of them. And I have questions on one of the others that's not that one.
This, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it needs to be a little bit larger. Yeah.
You want to see the chart, correct?
I think the amounts are enough. Mandy, unless you need to see more than this.
No, that's fine. I
This
have
is fine.
questions on two separate projects on that.
Okay. So we will start with Mandy, and everyone else should line up their questions and raise their hand if you have one. I have one on a different project. Go ahead, Mandy.
So my first question is on the North Cemetery fencing. The presentation we got indicated that DPW would do the work itself. It said because funding was reduced, I guess, from the request that the town made for that, and CPA reduced that funding. But I guess my question is, if DPW is doing the work itself, what other general work that DPW fits into its yearly schedule can't be done if it's adding this sort of project onto their now to-do list, even if there is funding to do it? Or is that funding enough to hire a seasonal worker to do the, I guess, the dismantling of the North Cemetery fencing?
Am I okay to?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to like break the Roberts rules or whatever.
Now
But, you know,
I have to do gallery, and you can raise your hand, but yes, Amy, you are here for this. Absolutely.
okay. First of all, Mandy Jo, I appreciate you thinking about the workload that's constantly increasing for us and kind of taking that into consideration. You know, we are always doing maintenance, and so if we weren't replacing the fence, we would be doing some sort of maintenance on it anyway. And so I think this particular project, you know, between our staff and, you know, the maintenance load that it would take off, it's going to offset. So I'm less worried about this one particular one, but I appreciate you taking that into consideration as you're evaluating.
Thank you. Kathy, do you want me to ask my other one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
And so far, nobody else has raised their hand, so I have questions on a completely separate one. So
Yeah. My other one's on the Groff Park work. I know it's farther down on the list. I have two questions on that one. The project indication indicated that a delineation of, I guess, wetlands still needs done. And I guess my question on that part is, did we need to do a delineation when we did the spray park and playground redo a couple years ago? Or I guess now it's close to 6 years ago. And if so, why is a new delineation needed? That seems like that's part of that $100,000 cost, is the cost of doing a delineation, but didn't we do one with the spray park and playground? And how long are those valid for? My second question is that the 100,000, again, if DPW is doing the work in-house, again, what might it be taking away from? But also, if it's doing it in-house, I'm struggling to see why it would be $100,000. That's, you know, equivalent to a large amount of FTE time, salary wise. So I guess I need some help explaining why this design part is going to take $100,000 if DPW is doing it in-house, and why we need a delineation.
and Dave, is your hand up to answer this? Fine, go. Dave Zomick has joined us, everyone.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. And again, I'll look to Amy to help me out here because we've had extensive discussions on this. Your first question, Mandy, about the delineation. Yes, we did a partial delineation for the spray park, but delineations are only good for 3 years. So that is not, you know, relevant anymore. We have to completely redo that. But this is a more extensive look because this work, this proposed ADA pathway, and then a new pavilion down on the lower level of Groff, if people are familiar with that, all of that is in the floodplain and within 200 feet of the river. It may be within 100 feet. So this is a much more extensive consulting project for someone to do in terms of delineating all the wetland, the riverbank, getting a full survey of Groff Park. We don't have a full survey. I believe this was donated to the town, but getting all of that information certainly will run into the tens of thousands of dollars, and we may not end up spending all of that. But I think in conversations with Amy, with Jason Skeels, with Aaron Jock, we felt as though it would be much better to be conservative in our number and simply not spend the money we don't need. Obviously, we're not going to overspend on this line. We need what we need, and we won't know that until we put this out to bid and see what it comes back in. We also, to Amy's point she made at a few other meetings in the CPAC meetings, we're also looking at Groff in the future, right? Groff has tremendous potential. I think none of us really realized its potential until we put in the spray park and the new playground. And so we've had calls for improvements at Groff and many other recreation areas, but particularly Groff. for a long time. So looking at potential other uses of Groff, we get, as you all know, we get inquiries about pump tracks, pickleball, basketball courts. And until we have the full survey of the property and we know our property lines, and we have a full survey of the river, the wetlands, the floodplain, all of that additional information, it's very hard for Amy and her staff to really go back and design it. So I think, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the engineering staff will design the walkway, but this is all the due diligence that is needed in preparation for that. And again, it may not cost that much. We didn't want to have to come back to you time and time again and slow down a design process. So it gives us a much more comprehensive look at a recreation area that we haven't really looked at much at all. When we did the spray park and the playground, it was really surgical. It was like we did the bare minimum to get that thing built in terms of survey work and wetlands and whatnot. So Amy, if I missed anything, please feel free to correct me or add to.
I think the only thing that I wanted to just add, like as you're looking at that 100K, if you guys have seen the breakdown, a good chunk of that is for the survey. And like Dave's saying, we want to get the survey for the whole area. But part of that's also because the pavilion and the ADA accessibility down to it is so close to the river that we're going to have to do some sort of reparations. And understanding the whole park gives us the availability to look at different places where we might be able to have some sort of an offset somewhere else. So it just kind of, it gives us flexibility as we're making those decisions.
That's a good point. Thank you, Amy. Mitigation, we may have to
Mitigation,
mitigate
thank
for
you,
our
that's the word.
impacts down below somewhere else in the park, i.e. we may have to replicate, or we
Yeah.
may have replicate wetlands or impacts to the lower level in the floodplain.
Thank you.
Bernie's hands up. Bernie, your hands up.
Yeah, just as we're talking about this, and as folks know, I have a particular interest in Fort River, and Groff Park is a sentimental favorite spot of mine. There's a considerable amount of frontage the park has, the town property has on the river. So will this delineation, Amy, will this focus on that lower level from the entrance to the where the trail begins, or is this going to have a broader sweep and encompass more of the frontage?
Sorry, are you asking if the delineation in the survey is it's gonna include the entire Groff property? So yes, that riverfront area, but the entire property all the way
Okay, so
to
we're not just looking at the first, say, third or half of the frontage on the river. We're looking at the rest of the frontage as well. So
Yeah.
that'll be helpful, and that's necessary to do given the given the amount of frontage on the river and the 200-foot setback and the history of that. I mean, a lot of Groff Park was once underwater. So, thank you.
Any other questions? Dave, you gave a good answer on why do we need to delineate if we did it already. So you said after 3 years, you have to do it again. So if we do this now, and the other projects, we're looking at our budget, other projects, unless money suddenly appears miraculously, we don't have a lot of other money. Will most of the work we do now be good for more than 3 years, or we're looking at have to do it again on the delineation?
Well, certain components of the work we're going to do, as Amy said, the survey will be good. That's forever. I mean, that shouldn't change. And that'll be the entire property. And then we'll basically build on the survey. So we'll think of it as GIS layers. We'll build on the baseline survey, and we will then, through this process, our consultants will add to the survey wetlands, floodplain, all of that information. The delineation of wetlands and resource areas is only good for 3 years, but if we do all of them, and Bernie made a good point, if you know Groff Park well, from just about the entrance of the park on your left, we own the frontage of the Fort River, and then we go a considerable distance to the north before we kind of run into Amherst College, some of Amherst College property. But we will have all of that baseline information for the future. And if we plan to do other things within those resource areas, then we would freshen up, if you will, the delineation. Wetlands lines do change. The Fort River cuts, and right now it's at a flood stage, so you never know. It might not look that floodplain might not look the same in 5 years or 1 year or 20 years. So,
Okay.
but the baseline information will last us a very long time. And we recognize, Kathy, that there are lots of other capital demands, but this gives us and future staff and board and committee members a great base of information to plan Groff Park in the future.
So questions or comments on any of the other projects? I'm just looking for hands. Bob?
Yeah, Dave, I had a general comment or a question, and it had to do with your presentation last Friday to JCPC about the need to replace the roof on the town hall and how much money that's going to cost. And you had said that you could maybe get some money from JCPC, or rather from CPA. Do any of these projects, are any of them more important than replacing the roof on the town hall, or will there be more money available this fall? How are you gonna get more money, get the money at CPAC to do this work, the town hall work?
Is that all right if I address that, Kathy?
Yep.
So that's a tough question, Bob, and really not one I don't think that's really my role to say, is it more important than these projects? I think the way I would frame it is, these are the projects that staff and private organizations have put forth for this round of funding. I think there will be a time in 2025, if we continue on the path we are with addressing building envelopes and priorities within that framework that facilities has, that we will likely come back to CPAC with requests. And it could be for town hall, it could be for other historic buildings that we own in town. For many years, with Paul's support, I have been really an ardent supporter and have pushed for CPA money to be spent on well designed and well thought out town projects. We have plenty, and this goes back even to Larry Schaefer. We spent, I believe, $750,000 of CPA dollars reappointing the brickwork, the stone and brickwork on the town hall. So it's a logical next step. We know the roof needs work. We do not have a full cost estimate on that. We have rough estimates of about $2 million. So I think it's logical to think we might come back to CPAC in the fall of this year with a request if all other things move forward, i.e. JCPC and other capital budgets move forward. It is a very high priority to fix the roof of this building. In fact, I just left a meeting with Rob Mora, and we laughed a little bit because in the last 24 hours, Rob has 3 blue recycle bins on his desk catching water. And so the roof here is leaking in many different places. So it's just the reality of us having deferred maintenance. So that's kind of the...
Mandy?
Okay.
So that question brings up another question for me, which is, a lot of times when I see the CPA requests, there's an estimated revenue balance more than 4 figures large. But this year, if we grant all the requests, the estimated revenue balance is only $2,500.
That was my question.
That's really tight, especially if you're thinking about coming back next fall. I don't know whether you were talking about during next fall's CPA process, where then they vote on next year's estimated revenues for FY27. But is this a estimated remaining balance that could restrict us applying for mid-year grants that might need matches that we would normally match through CPA and stuff like that. And should we be thinking about that and the consequences of that, or what to recommend around that?
I guess I would defer to if Holly is on this call or Melissa on that question.
I had exactly the same question, Mandy, that we're, that reserve has been a useful thing because for various years. Hi, Holly. Holly's hand is up.
So, again, that's a hard question for me to answer personally. This is what the committee decided through its deliberations to recommend. So they did not decide to leave a budgeted reserve this year. They wanted to fund all of the projects. So that was the committee's choice. We typically in years past have spent just about all of the money. We try to get as close to zero as we can, depending on what the projects are. So right now, proposals will not open up again until September 1st of next year for the next round. Folks can come to the CPA off cycle with, emergency projects or other projects. And at that point, we would have to, the only way that we could recommend additional projects would be through borrowing authorization at this point. But this is what the committee decided to do with this available funds this year.
So, okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. My question was on the Mill River baseball field. And I realized the 80 is less than you originally asked for, Dave. So is this I'm out in that area a lot. And my impression is it's not often that both of the ball fields are being used in a regular way. And so the question was, do we need to do the work on the I guess you call it field one, the one that's further away near the river? That was number one. And then the electrification and or sound system, I wasn't sure whether that is in this 80,000, in terms of being able to mic it, do announcements, in terms of sound, whether that is essential. And are we talking about lights so people can be playing baseball at night, because the summer daylight is pretty good for playing late. So it was a question, now that it's 80 as opposed to the original, it looks more reasonable, but I wasn't sure it was essential. So I was thinking, should we be reserving that rather than spending it more on the baseball fields? And that was really I didn't get it to you early enough to see how many people play, because I've watched some people playing cricket there, and that they're not as heavily used as in the past. Is an impression of the ball fields. I know they are our ball fields, so that is how much do we use them? Are they often having both ball fields being used at the same time? And do we really need this extra work done? Even if it's part of the larger plan, it's a question of need.
Sure, there's a number of questions in there, Kathy. I'll try to address them. Do people play cricket on those Little League fields? I've never seen people play cricket. I've seen them play at the Cow Field over near North Amherst Library.
They actually play cricket. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
on the far field, the one that doesn't have what you want to be adding, they play it.
Yeah, cricket is it's a wonderful sport, but it's not too compatible with baseball fields. It does quite a bit of damage to the turf. But anyway, we should find a place where we could have a cricket field. But anyway, so let me give a little background here. So this is the continuation of a proposal that the Amherst Baseball League, a nonprofit Amherst Baseball and Softball Leagues, submitted to us a couple of years ago. And due to cost escalation and other factors, we simply didn't have enough money to finish the work. And that work, it really is fairly limited. It is to put dugouts, i.e. shade structures, they kind of one and the same, on one of the fields, and then bring electricity to both the fields This is not for lights. There is no plan. There never has been a plan to light these fields or have night games. It is simply to have conduit and associated service for audio equipment, i.e. announcing games, announcements. And what they do right now, what they have to do is they have to run extension cords, which is just never a good thing. If you know Mill River Park, it is too long. It is not a good safety approach to do extension cords. And that's what they've been doing for years. So really that was their original proposal. We built on it a little. We've worked with Amherst Baseball in years past, and it's simply to do the dugout / shade structures on one of the fields. We already have them on the other, and then it's to bring electricity to both fields. And we're hoping it doesn't, again, we are conservative in our estimate. We're hoping it doesn't cost 80. Keep in mind, any money that isn't used never leaves our accounts. Holly and accounting oversee all of these expenses and all of the contracts. So we're hoping we can get it for much less.
Can
And
you
so that is what this is for.
How do you run electricity to the far field? The one that's close to the pool I can see, because you've got the pavilion, you've already got some. Are you going to run it underground?
Oh
or-
yeah, it'll be conduit. It'll be a small, very narrow ditch done by a machine, conduit placed in the ground, and then the associated wiring, and then there'll be a stub out and a meter. DPW will meter the electricity used, but it's really so they can, like anywhere else, whether it's the fields at Community Field, they can host tournaments, baseball and softball tournaments, and the like there, in a safe way. That's the long and short of it. There's really not many bells and whistles to this proposal.
Okay. And, it's really, it's really wet in terms of the conduits. And my only other question is, do they ever do fundraising to augment whatever?
They do Amherst Baseball, and they are now Amherst Baseball and softball. They are one of the leagues, one of the nonprofits that has done extensive fundraising and actually given a tremendous amount of both in-kind as well as cash donations to the town, both for Mill River and for the fields at Community Fields, tens of thousands of dollars in both in-kind, but also in cash to help us complete projects and work with DPW, for instance, on infield, redoing the infields at the baseball field at Community Field. They just did new scoreboards at Mill River. We didn't pay at all for those. That was all private fundraising. So they're, in my mind, a leader in terms of fundraising for some of these sports organizations that are using our fields.
Mandy's hand is up.
Yes, something Dave said brought another random question up to me, which is electricity usage. You said there'd be stubs up there and then there'd be a meter there. Is the intent then to charge renters for the use of that electricity? And I guess my overarching question is, does the pavilion have electricity like that? Is there a way we turn it off or turn it on? I don't know how it works, say, on the town common, but how would that electricity usage work in terms of field rental, pavilion rental, costs of doing stuff? Or would the electricity be on all the time so that anyone could plug anything in and the town would be essentially eating that cost no matter what it is? Or how's that going to be managed?
Yeah. Well, for the fields themselves, I will say the electricity use is going to be pretty small. It's for tournaments, games, for a pitching machine, that kind of thing. So it's going to be fairly small. But, working with DPW, we do want to anticipate that, DPW budgets, town budgets can't just absorb all of this. So that's the reason we would put a meter, this usage would be metered. In terms of your other questions about the pavilion, there is electricity there. I don't think we currently monitor that, but Amy might be able to help me out. I don't think there's a meter on the usage there, but it's something, the reality of shrinking budgets and increasing use that we kind of have to look at. Now, these might, at the end of the stubs of these are probably lockable. In other words, people couldn't, I'm sure there's a way for this to be designed that we don't have people plugging in their laptops or phones or whatever and using that electricity. But again, around the pavilion, I don't think we charge for electricity around the pavilion for, say, a DJ or music or whatever happens at the pavilion. Amy might know more.
I don't know at the pavilion, like whether that's part of the pavilion rental or not. I know, like, say at the town common, the outlets are locked. And then when people fill out that they want to use the town common, if they want electricity, it is metered because it has to, we have to pay a bill for it, but we're not charging people for the electrical use. It's just a flat, you pay whatever, $25 or whatever it is, if you want to have access to the electricity during your event that you're renting it for. So I don't know what that would mean for the softball field, but at least in terms of having a similar setup that would make sure that it was secure, so we don't have people charging their cell phones, which, people will take advantage of anywhere that they can. Certainly that's easily doable, and we have systems in place like that at the town common.
Bernie,
I can tell you from experience, you have to find someone with the key. You can't just plug in anywhere. I want to thank Amy and Dave for their continued good work on this stuff. I really appreciate the efforts that they put in and the thorough explanations that they have available to us. So thank you. And I'd also like to offer the observation once again that deferred maintenance means broken. So we should be relentless in keeping things up. So, thank you.
I'm not, see, I think we can take the screen down because we've probably got a good scope. We've already had a good explanation of War Memorial, in terms of where you are with it. And the only future question I have about that is, as we're not sure where all the money is going to come from, are you in part looking at whether we can just repair, renovate the existing structure? So as we put this money on, I mean, Dave made that comment, I think at JCPC the other day, on you've got enough money to get somewhere on this, but not all the way, is my sense of this next step on the War Memorial Bathhouse. Dave?
Yeah, my
So
apology.
I'm not questioning the
Oh.
money. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
looking forward on it. Yeah.
Yeah, my apologies. I missed the first few minutes of this meeting, and I'm sure Amy and perhaps Denise.
No,
Oh.
there was Amherst. We were waiting for Amherst Media. You missed nothing.
Oh, okay. So was that a question in terms of our approach?
Well, it was just a statement that this amount of money, I understand what it's going for, but it's still not buying the whole project in terms of, if we can't buy the bigger vision, do we have a plan to pivot for
So I think,
something else? Yeah.
yeah, if I might, Kathy, I think, and feel free, Amy, to jump in here too. I see Paul on the call as well, but I think we are pivoting right now. That is what we are doing. We heard loud and clear, and we're well aware of the capital demands, the demands on all of our capital budgets. So the $4 million plan, which was not, I overused the term Ferrari. It was not that. It was simply, moving the bathhouse to the eastern side of the building and providing a program that we thought was reasonable, and the number was $4 million. So we got that, and we're now pivoting to take a look and say, okay, let's pull our team back together and let's take a look at, could we renovate the existing building, a significant renovation of the existing building? We've had some walkthroughs with our staff from the facilities department and building inspector and DPW. And so that's where we're pivoting to that now. So if the council, if your recommendation to the council is to fund the 500,000 with the previous funding allocation of 750, that would give us $1.25 million in that fund, if you will, that perhaps could be applied to some sort of renovation. We're not saying that's all we would need, but we're cognizant of the fact that $4 million, we are just not going to have that kind of budget to tap into. I will say I think we would have to look at the previous vote for the 750. I think that may have referenced, I just haven't had a moment to look at it, but it probably referenced a new building. And I think we'd need some interpretation on that, whether that could be applied to renovating the existing building. I will say that given we were in the building, Amy and I and other staff 2 weeks ago, and it is a building that DPW has done their very best to get ready for summer use every year, but it is 1950, 57, 58, somewhere in there. It needs a tremendous amount of work. The bones are pretty good, but the rest of it needs a significant amount of work to get it ready, even for this year's summer season. And we're working on kind of a plan for that. But so we are pivoting, Kathy. We're pivoting to a less expensive project, and we're asking our design team to really take a look at, could the existing building be renovated for, at least, with a budget of 1.25. We might have to come back. We'll have to see what more updated cost estimates bring us. So happy to have Amy, if Amy's been with me on all those conversations. So
Amy, if you have anything to add, I'm not seeing any. That's the big, when you look down the list, that's the biggie. I'm not seeing other on our hands up on the set of Denise.
Yeah, thank you all for inviting me to join you. On the pools and seeing that number, obviously it's a challenge, but as aquatics coordinator, swim coach, I'm in 5 of the pools from Hampshire College, the middle school pool, the 2 outdoor pools here throughout the academic and summer season in different capacities. And I think about the pools as being like a constellation. Each pool relies on the other. The quality of the experience of Mill River's passionate lap swimmers, of which I'm one of them, relies on the presence and health of War Memorial and the middle school pool. And in the background of these precious things that I think they're public goods, having access to a pool and all the programming that I can do for the community in them, the school districts in Western Mass are really struggling locally, so not necessarily Amherst at the moment, but really struggling to make a statement and put a budget line into repairing those pools. So I think about the high school season, I think about the middle school pool, Belchertown, Longmeadow, Agawam. All of these are indoor pools that are facing conversations about whether or not they can keep going. And the fact that Amherst can have these outdoor experiences for kids, it's a draw for our camps. I'm able to teach so many kids how to swim every summer. And if we can, as Bernard said, if we can repair before they break, it's worth it in my mind. So they're just precious, and they change the way that I think the community feels about itself by having and not to mention the cooling centers that we certainly experienced last summer's need. The climate's not going to get any cooler. Water quality at the outdoor watering holes has shifted and impact free access to water. So anything we can do to keep War with us I'm here for all of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us. I didn't introduce you because I wasn't sure who you were, but thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, but that's great. That was perfect. Very much. Are there any other, I don't see any other hands, so it may be that we can end and thank our presenters very much. Welcome to stay with us, but not necessary. I see Mandy's got her hand up.
No, the question is just, are we looking to make a recommendation today?
That would be, do people feel comfortable making a recommendation today? Because we have a motion in the packet with the financial order. And if we are comfortable at this point, that we're not making any changes with the list, I'm not seeing anybody saying no. So would someone like to make a motion? And should we put the financial order back up on the screen, or do you have it in front of you, Mandy?
I have it in front of me, so I can make the motion. So I guess I move to recommend the council adopt appropriation and transfer order FY 26-07A. Town of Amherst Community Preservation Act, an order appropriating the FY 2026 Community Preservation Act budget as required under MGL Chapter 44B.
Second.
And you read the actual wording, Mandy, so it doesn't say as presented or anything. So what comes with it is the list of projects, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Then I will call for a vote. And I think what I would like to do is just start with our resident members first. So the way the rest of us vote doesn't influence your opinion. Tom Porter,
I'm in support.
Bernie,
I support.
Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Kathy's a yes, Mandy,
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
It's unanimous with both residents supporting and one absent. So I will draft a report to this effect that we discussed and recommended. So we have done CPAC, or the community CEPA. Thank you all very much, and thank you for the work that went into these projects and the team, Holly and everyone that supports the committee. I think if you would like to leave, you can, and we thank you very much for joining us. So then the next item, the way it was listed, was Anna Devlin Gother asked during a council meeting if we could have an initial discussion about the guidelines. So this is not voting, it's revisiting them, talking about them. And if she is, I saw that she's in the audience. So if people are willing to move on to that next item, then we can bring her in to be a panel member. I don't see any objections, so Anna has joined us. Hi, Anna.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Do you want me to?
If you want to,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. If you just want to say a few words of what you had in mind and provide some context for a discussion.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. So what I'm hoping to do today is hear from the Finance Committee about generally thoughts on possible revisions to the budget guidelines. This is something that I'm prepping a memo right now for the town council to discuss, but I wanted to get the appetite of thought of the appetite of the Finance Committee on what should be included in possible revisions in terms of where folks might be willing to go or not. Because you have been so steeped in this discussion, I think that you'll have a perspective that I don't have since I'm not a member of the Finance Committee, and generally wanted to hear more from this group of people about possible shifts to the budget guidelines and where people stand on that. Does that work as a starting point?
It does, and I'm going to look for any hands.
Yeah.
And if I
And
don't,
I'm happy to kind of throw out the general numbers of what we might consider, as well as whether it would make sense for the council to consider just a revision in percentages recommended in the financial guidelines, or if the committee also believes we should be recommending areas for the town manager to consider reducing.
so Bob has raised his hand. Bob.
Yeah, I just, Anna, just to kind of set the stage or set the context a little. I was chair of the Finance Committee last calendar year, and we discussed these guidelines over probably 6 or 7 meetings. And one of the things I tried to do was to get a consensus formed around the guidelines. And I think we did achieve a consensus on the guidelines themselves. And we considered a lot of these issues, like should we have equal funding to all the four major things? What do we do when we have free cash surpluses? And we sort of built them into the guidelines. So I think, I mean, I'm certainly open to any new suggestions, but I do think that the guidelines were arrived at a pretty intense set of discussions, and I don't want to reopen that wound. It was hard. It was hard work, and we worked hard, and we got to a point where I think we had a consensus.
So if,
May I
I see
respond?
Mandy hand up.
Oh,
Mandy's
can I
hand up.
respond to Bob first? Is that possible?
I expect Anna to respond before I ask
Yeah,
statement.
no, that's fine.
So Bob, with all due respect, and my intention is not at all to minimize what Finance Committee did and the work that went into creating those financial guidelines, but just like you said, it was this committee, and it was only this committee. And I don't think that we had the information that we have now about the needs of the other bodies that those financial guidelines impact. I think we have a better picture, a better idea of the big picture. There we go. At this point than this committee did when it first created those. That is, I am in no way suggesting that the financial guidelines that were created were slapdash or weren't really meticulously crafted. What I'm saying is that now we have a better picture of what the needs are. And I am also prepared at a later date to talk about the process in general, because I think that it's inherently flawed and leads to situations like this where we find out needs after they've been created. So that's a different conversation. But really, the reason why I'm bringing this forward now isn't because I thought that the financial guidelines were mistaken when they were created. I voted for them. It's just that they came to council, it's that we have more information now about the impact of those guidelines than we did then. And that's why I believe we need to reconsider them in light of that.
I see Mandy's hand is up, and I do have comments. I'm just waiting to make sure I call on everybody else. Mandy.
My comments in some sense are all over the place, so don't expect me to complete them in this one, because I'm still sort of thinking things through. But I guess what I've heard Anna say is that she's intending on bringing, I think this is sort of my basis for my comments, that she's thinking of bringing or planning on bringing a request to amend the guidelines, the part that indicates sort of the same increase across all four operating budget side, and amending that to change that to some sort of differential between that. And I don't know what that will be, but something that, if I had to guess, increases regional and elementary school operating budget lines greater than the municipal and library, maybe, I don't know. And that she's wondering whether the finance committee would want anything else included in addition to that in terms of a proposal, not asking necessarily whether we support it or not, but so I'm gonna say a couple of things with that. So that's my understanding, and I would say yes, I would need more included on it. For example, I know there has been some talk and some concern about and our guidelines discuss, and our manager goals explicitly say we want some more information on CRES. And I'm bringing that one up because these guidelines say we support the continuation of the CRES department, which may act as an alternative, and goes on to say that. But if there is a thinking that that continuation may look different based on what is being potentially recommended for a reduction in percentage of year-over-year increase for the municipality, well, that paragraph needs to have changes to it potentially. You know, I think we do need to, if there is going to be a request to not keep the percentages the same, some of the things that go into my consideration are, what is the effect of that change this late in the game to the municipal operating budget side? And recognizing that about a month before the budget is due, changing that number can have real consequences. And I think we would absolutely, as a council, need to indicate to the manager what potential reductions we would be agreeable to. Whether that be in specific programs, or whether that be in how the effect of those reductions affects the residents or the services of the town, or the received by the residents or offered by the town, or the operations of our town employees. I don't think we could say, hey, given what I think Anna's trying to propose, say, Manager Paul, I know we gave you, and you've been operating under an expected 4% year over year, and now we're going to cut that to 2%, and we're not going to give you any guidance as to what to do with that. I don't think that would be appropriate this late in the game, although I'm not sure it's appropriate ever. So I would need to see that so that the council can have that discussion. Two, the other thing that I have concerns about, and I don't know whether it's doable in a memo, Anna, I'm going to tell you that right now, is when I look at the projections that have 4%, that have a total of year-over-year operating budget increases of about $3 million. And that's 4% across the board, except for the region. We know there's some issues there, but the municipal and elementary school get approximately the same dollar amount out of that $3 million, and that's about $1 million. So 4% is about $1 million. So every 1% decrease is about 250,000. So if you're thinking of, I'm just going to make numbers up because I don't know what you're thinking. If you're thinking going up to 5% for the two, say, that needs to find a one full percentage for each of them is approximately $500,000, which would not take necessarily the municipal down from 4 to 3. It would take it probably down from 4 to 2, and remove $500,000 from the municipal potentially, depending on what else the proposal is. Doing that year after year, if the plan is not this year only, and that would be my other question. This is where I'm getting to. My other question would be, is this for this year only, or is this an intention to continue the potential for a differential in year-over-year increases for multiple years? Because we've actually asked in this budget document to have projected budgets for the next 2 years for the town and the schools and the library. If that is going to essentially be a multi-year process, I've got real concerns about the sustainability of something like that. And so I would need to sort of see some of that thinking about what the effects would be if the intention is to continue that differential over the course of the years, so that we can have some of that conversation. I'm going to stop there because I want to hear others, but that's sort of my first, here's things.
So I have some specifics. So Andy, I see your hand up, and I see Melissa. Melissa, did you want to react to anything Mandy just said, or do you want to wait and hear what 2 other people want? It's up to you.
Well, I was just gonna, if you don't mind, react to what Mandy said. I think that one of the things that she pointed out that I wanted to echo is that, you know, a reduction in the you know, a change in the allocation from being level, you know, level percentage behind the whole unit has a significant effect on the municipal budget. And I can only assume the library as well. And we are both in the position that we too are struggling to close the gap even at the 4% increase. So any amount that reduces that 4% reduces our ability to present a level budget at this time. And then I would also say, to Mandy's point, is that even if this is a one-year adoption, I think that, use your words, Mandy, is that we had said last year that this was a one-year a reduction, but it doesn't ever work out that way. So even a one-year reduction in the town's budget or a one-year increase in the school's budget recreates a new base, which ultimately increases or decreases the funding formula going forward. So that it has, even if it was a one-year adjustment, it has long-term consequences. So just, want to put that out there that these are considerations, not saying for or against, but they have long-term implications either way, and that we in both the library, I'm going to speak for them even without Sharon here, because I know that she's in a similar situation, that other rising costs and our contractual obligations to our employees and light bills and health insurance and everything else that we all have considered, and all the deferred maintenance that we were just talking about is all part of what we have to manage within our budgets, not only in the capital side, but also in ongoing maintenance to our equipment. And that some of that comes out of our operating. So I just want to say that I'm glad that the school has been very vocal and has communicated well, their hardships, and maybe we should do a better job of communicating ours in the other areas. But I would say that you don't have a full picture of how difficult this year is. You have a picture from one organization, which is valid and real, and I don't want to dismiss that in any way, but I think that that we have concerns on the municipal side and the library side as well. And maybe we can do a better job of communicating those. So I just, want to put out there that it's not, well, there's extra, so let's just give it. It's like there are decisions to be made, and those decisions have consequences.
Andy. And then I would like to speak next, Mandy.
Yes, I have a number of things to say, and I'm going to try and be, as Mandy has always done, very quick in working through them. But since Melissa brought up the library, I obtained a document this afternoon just before the meeting from the chair, and had sent out to one of her lists, the Sharon Sherry, that was from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners about what the impact of federal budget cuts to things that the library relies on could affect their budget. And so I think that the question of putting the library at further risk by reduction is a valid subject and needs to be talked about with the library folks. Second thing is that, as has been alluded to, and I'll put the number out there that Paul had presented to the council, that for the first time ever, he's developing a budget with a $540,000 deficit for the municipal programs. And we need to understand what that means and why that is and what is at risk. I think that's part of our responsibility as a council and as a finance committee to inform the council to really have a better understanding of that than we now have. The Another thing that I've been very concerned about in this whole discussion and the way that it's being presented by advocates for the schools is to talk about the amount of money that has been left at the end of the year and how it was chosen to be allocated. It was very deliberately recommended to put it into the capital stabilization fund. And if we are going to alter that policy, then we need to understand the financing structure for the 4 major capital projects and how the capital stabilization fund balance now makes those remaining 2 projects more or less practical to put forward. So that's another thing that needs to be involved in the discussion. Getting back to what I said about the libraries, what I was going to report if I had time, and I want to talk to Paul about this later. If we don't have time, just but we had I was at the MMA Fiscal Policy Committee meeting this morning. A substantial part of the discussion was what is going on in Washington and how that might affect municipal budgets. And that is a far more serious subject than I think we're going to be able to cover in any discussion at this meeting. But it is a huge subject, and it's not. And I'll give you 2 examples. They very deliberately, Debbie Kaufman and Jackie Lavender Bird made a presentation to the committee, and it just horrified me to think about it, because one of the things that they're talking about in Washington right now amongst the House and Senate is where they can capture money to give to their tax increases to the wealthy through the continuation of the first Trump administration cuts. And one of them is to end the tax deductibility of municipal bonds. And you know, we know that that would have a tremendous and horrific effect on local bond interest rates and the ability to sell local bonds. It would drive up our costs of all borrowing that would happen. And it's one of those things that right now it's a lobbying strategy, but we need to at least acknowledge that. Another one is the question of whether there's going to be tampering with the IRA program and where there's funding that's not been given. We've been counting on that as part of our funding for the elementary school, because we have so many energy credits that we can have. And my last comment, as I can yield the floor to others, is that, you know, having been through this process over more years than I think anybody else except Bernie has been through, the whole subject of giving even amounts is always been to try and keep the major functional areas, the municipal budget, the library, the elementary schools, and the regional schools from fighting with each other originally before town meeting over, I need a little more money and I need to take it away from somebody else, and to try and have a culture in our town of having all of the major functional areas understand each other, work together, and respect each other, and not get involved in infighting. If you break that policy, the council is not just going to deal with it this year, it is going to deal with it forever. And you're going to have every year, I need a little bit more, and therefore I'm more important than the other guy. And it's the council that is going to be in a very weird place, because it is our decision. We have a responsibility to all components. We have a responsibility to the municipal side, because we're also the legislative and budget authority for the municipal side. I think that you break that pact that has been in place for a long time in Amherst, you're never getting it back.
I'm going to wait to go through everybody's comments first. So I want to try to come in slight different way. The only way I could consider thinking about a differential increase or departure is if we have a way of finding the money. So I have that I would, and it's not by reducing the municipal budget. So I would keep the 4%. So I'm just going to say, this is my opinion. I do think the CREST program could be frozen. It has 2 vacancies right now. And when you do the roll up on benefits, that's significant. We may have to rethink the model. And this would give us time to rethink the model and buy some time. That would also give some breathing room in the municipal budget. Because what I realized when Paul spoke the other day at the municipal, the rental bylaw has introduced new staff to the town. They're called inspectors. And so within his 4%, he has to find money for an expansion of staff that is new. So my other place, and I'm looking around the screen and realize that each of these may be sacrosanct parts of our budget. If we postpone the implementation of that, we would not have to fill those positions. They're vacant right now. We've been out, they're opening. So it's not a layoff. I'm trying to avoid reducing a place where a person is already working. That would produce savings in terms of we budget for the positions we think we need, even if they're not filled yet. And my third place for potential money, and I'm not necessarily, and then I'll get to my last of what I might be willing to do with it. The third is as on JCPC for just this year, I think we might be able to live with something less than 10.5% just this year. And that would free up some capital money. So it doesn't address this, what do we do next year? Because I think we need to be back up to 10.5. So I think there may be some breathing room in this year's capital budget that could be shifted to operating. That's what I'm looking to do, to shift it to operating. So those are places where I think there might be additional money for the operating budget. Then what do I think about the operating budget side? I think we already went up by 6% on the regional, because last year we had we funded an extra amount with ARPA money. And because of our guidelines, that is now considered to be part of the baseline going forward. And any departure or any significant departure from the regional agreement has us subsidizing other towns. So I definitely wouldn't go higher than 4%. It's a gift. And then when I saw between the 3 budgets we had to look at, if we go higher, it doesn't even finance the equivalent in a higher budget for the region. It just lowers the amount other towns are paying. So I would tie anything for the region to moving closer to that. And the elementary schools, there might be maybe some leeway if it's a bridge year, where we're moving from 3 to 2 schools. So I'm not saying definitely, but there would be a reason for that rather than we're just, Andy, on your plea, we should be even-handed. It would be a one-time as a bridging rather than we're departing. So those are just my thoughts to where would I think we could revisit. And as Mandy said, we've got to do it sooner rather than later, because Paul's putting a budget together. And I'm trying not to undermine that process very much, but give him guidance. I do think we would need to see what FY27 and FY28 look like. I don't think we can do just a 1 year. We have to look at what happens. And Mandy said that this year was 3 million. It's a little over 3 million. It's because of where a couple of things happened. We got more aggressive with the way we're willing to count some revenues and new growth. At 2.5%, we wouldn't have 3 million. So we wouldn't have 3 million. And that's what we had this year that allowed us to go up. The 3.5 million allowed us to go up to 4. We can't count on that. So I would want to see best guesses with what we know so far in this current year about 27, 28, because I don't want to have us be unsustainable. So I don't want to force cuts on the municipal side. I think that the budget is extraordinarily tight on the municipal because we've added a 10-person department called CRESS. We added 4 firefighters and we've added inspectors. I mean, and these have been council-driven policies. So the council could revisit some of those. The firefighters probably are a necessary workforce. So I'll just stop there because I wanted to say I won't go anywhere without finding the money. And I don't want, and I'll just say the money can't come out of the 4% for municipal. That is really needed for that broad scope of departments. Fringes alone are taking $500,000. Health insurance, forget the pension side. I mean, and the wages are going up. We have union contracts. So I'll stop there, but I wanted to be pretty specific on and not just find the money somewhere. These are potential places that are trying not to lay anyone off who's currently working for us, where we might achieve some savings that would be operational savings. Okay, I'm taking my hand down. Bernie has not spoken yet, and Mandy's hand is up and Melissa's hand. So I'd like the order to be Bernie, Mandy, then Melissa.
Thank you, Kathy. I'll try and be mercifully brief, unusual for me, because there's been lots of good ideas put forward and lots of good arguments put forward by members of the Finance Committee so far. What I would really like to do, based on my experience with 4 other towns that would go into town meetings or budget meetings with feuding departments and feuding disciplines, is to reinforce what Andy had to say about the logic of equal percentages across the board. That process has been not necessarily unique to Amherst, but Amherst is the only town I know of that's practiced that. And I used to sit in my office in the other communities and look at Amherst and say, how did they make that work? Because I think once you abandon that principle of equal distribution, Andy's correct, you're going to find yourself feuding and feuding and feuding, not just next year, but off well into the future. The other thing is, frankly, we can't go to the Commonwealth and say, we have a crisis in education funding, but oh, by the way, we're going to fix it by cutting other stuff. That's not a fix. It's basically saying to the Commonwealth that they can abandon any promises they've made in terms of education funding, because we'll rob some other program to make up the difference. And the third thing that really does trouble me, and again, this is echoed, I think, I'm echoing Andy, is I'm willing to bet. I won't be on the Finance Committee after June 30th, but I'm willing to bet in the next fiscal year, take bets right now, that we'll see 19 C cuts. And those will be painful, and those will happen in the middle of the fiscal year, and those will be causing us to scramble. And at that point, we will be very happy that we have some free cash because we will be able to use it to patch some holes. Federal funding makes up, by my accounting, and I could be wrong, somewhere between 20 and 25% of the Commonwealth's budget. It's a big chunk of change, and it's going away. So the best thing we can do now, I think, is to make the reductions we need to make. There shouldn't be the assumption that everything is going to work out real nice on the municipal side or the library side of the budget. And those divisions have their own set of struggles, which aren't necessarily transparent, but they happen. So I really don't want to see any changes right at the moment. I think people will need to make cuts where they need cuts to bring it in line with the funding that's available. I think Kathy's point about show me the money is absolutely right on target. Thank you.
Mandy and then Melissa. And then, this was, Anna had asked that we're not trying to make a decision here. We're just having a discussion. So we're not going to conclude with what do we think we should do. And then Paul's hand is up as well.
Thank you. I'll be brief. In response to some of the conversation I've heard, I know there's an argument. I support and agree with the contention that I think it was Melissa initially stated that the schools have been better communicators about the difficulties in their budgets. And so if a differential in increase is proposed, I would actually want to have information as to what the municipal increases are and how those difficulties and increases compare to the struggles the schools have had with their own budget increases, right? I guess I'm not confident that especially some of the things Paul has said and Melissa has said, that the schools are saying their year-over-year increases for quote level services, although I say I don't like that term, but it's the term they use, and they look at percentages in the 7, 8, 9 range and all of that. I'd kind of like to know what our percentages on year-over-years are for if you're looking at that, like trying to do an apples to apples there. And I know our manager and our finance director are very circumspect about stating some of that out loud, which is why it makes it hard to have these discussions. But if we're asking for differential because, well, the schools are facing year-over-year increases because of inflation and costs and all of this of that, I need to know what the municipal and library are doing too, because that's the only way I can make that informed decision. Kathy talked about reducing capital. I wouldn't probably support that. We have lots of capital needs, but the thing that I think would the problem I have initially with that is not just we have a lot of capital needs, but as we worked ourselves up in the last 6 years from about a 7.5 or a 7, I forget where we started when the council started, in terms of dedication to capital expenses, and that increase was 0.5% every year. I just remember Paul every year saying, that goal of getting to 10 and now 10.5 does strain all the other budgets because you start with sort of that total increase. And so I would be concerned about reducing capital for just 1 year to under 10% with a goal of going back up, because then you gotta put not just the 2.5 increase on the 10.5, you're putting a full percentage or whatever on the 10.5. So I think it doesn't address the entire operating budget issues and just changes where the issue is and what year the issue is on. I just want to put in some support for regarding bridging funding for new schools. I've been asking for that at BCG and all about what does an elementary budget look like in FY27 in terms of positions that are needed potentially in 26, but not in 27. And how does that relate to the FY26 budget and the FY27 budget? Because I think that potentially opens up new avenues for elementary school funding that should be addressed in whatever you propose, Anna. And then finally, I absolutely agree with Kathy regarding regional school assessment. And if we're not getting closer to it, I don't know how to word this, but I think Kathy said tying it to moving closer to the regional agreement, talking about if we're looking at gifts above numbers or things like that we put conditions on those gifts, whatever they may be, but we look at some of that and address within the guidelines our concerns regarding the regional school assessments and how they have been voted and discussed at 4 towns. Thank you.
Now I have both Melissa and Paul's hands are up. Whichever order you want to do.
Go
I
ahead.
can
Melissa.
go first. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was just gonna thank you for saying it, Mandy. I just wanted to remind everyone that if we go back to less than 10.5% on capital, that the transition back, because what we've built into the base of the budgets going forward, we haven't made those necessary cuts in order to sustain this 1 year, then the leap back to 10.5 will be harder. Just, you know, it's a decision that to be made, but just to recognize that it then puts us back in the stretch to get to back to that baseline. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is that some and not all of the council initiatives that grew departments have revenue attached to them. So part of what when we increase the revenue for buildings and permits, some of that revenue comes from the inspections for the rental program that we were starting. And so while it does not completely cover the cost of those positions necessarily, because of the way that we share our general fund revenue, and it's considered general fund revenue. So the new revenue created by those positions does not directly pay for those employees, but it does become part of the revenue that is collected in the building and permits department that is then shared to help support all 4 of the operational areas. And with respect to fire, all of our fire department personnel are EMT and run ambulance. And while that, again, does not fully support their department, they do produce a great deal of revenue by having those staff available, and the amount of billing that we do for ambulance billing, which ultimately does get transferred in to help support the overall operations of the town and, you know, all 4 town groups, just the way that we handle it. So again, they're new initiatives. They are not break-even initiatives, but they are part of how we are developing increasing revenues in the areas that we have control over.
Well,
Thank you. So I just think this is a really important conversation to have. So I really appreciate Anna motivating it forward. So I think that's a good thing. I also want to support what Melissa said, that I do not underestimate what the challenges are that the school district has. And I think we always have to remember, right now we're talking about the regional school district, but you always have to multiply by 2. Because if the regional school district says their needs are 6.5%, you're likely to hear from the elementary schools that it's 6.5% as well. And so I think that as we think about this, it's really important to recognize the scale of the challenge that we're trying to address. I want to take a step back and look at the role of the council. The council are the fiscal stewards of the community. You set the long-range goals. You set the how we're going to conduct ourselves in these conversations, and you establish the sort of policies that we have. And I think, you know, what Andy said was really vital. I think that the stability that the town has had and the reputation for strong finances is really based on this sort of non-combat atmosphere. When we get new dollars, it really is distributed fairly equally. Maybe fairly is a loaded term, so it'll be equally. And I think that it does move away from the win-lose kind of dynamic. If you change that dynamic, I think every conversation from here to the rest of our lives is going to be really different. And it's going to be similar to what happens in many other communities. That's why Amherst is unique in this. This town has built a culture of working together, and it's very fragile right now. We're really in danger of losing that. And I think that the council has to I believe the council needs to set the example on how we conduct ourselves. We can't think about this year. We have to think many years, how we're going to conduct ourselves from now on. People don't forget these things. When someone foregoes a cost of living increase, you hear about it for a decade afterwards. I went without a cost. This has happened to non-union employees in the town of Amherst. They were zeroed out 1 year. And I still hear from non-union employees, remember when we took a 0 to help out the town? Everybody else got an increase. So people don't forget these what they perceive as unfair treatment to them. I don't think a 1-year funding solution is a long-term fix. We need a long-term fix. You've all said that. It's not new. We said that last year, and there has to be, we have to move that direction. I think everybody's in agreement with that. I think we have, just to give a frame of things, we have budgeted about a 2% COLA for all of our bargaining units. Come July 1, we will have no settled contracts for on the union side, 6 bargaining units with no settled contracts. We, our HR department's like, how are we going to settle a contract at 2% when they're getting their 14% increase in health insurance is eating up more than that? And we know what's going on in the marketplace. We're in a really difficult place right now from the town side. If we, that's what we're going into with, that's what we're going to be recommending. So I don't know, that's going to cause a lot of stress on all of our staff. So, so I think that my hat is town manager. My job is fiscal, making sure the town is fiscally stable for years ahead. I think the council is the major, you are the decider, you are the legislature of the town. You are the policy, you set the policy. And I reckon, I think Anna has a good point about how do those financial guidelines get established, but ultimately you are the ones that do the appropriation. Nobody else does. So I think recognizing the importance of your role is really critical to where we move forward. So there's a lot to talk about. There's lots of different things. We don't know how we're going to hit our $500,000 gap. We talk about it almost daily. And I appreciate all the comments that you had, Kathy, for different options for us to go forward. And we welcome those. Ultimately, we'll deliver a budget to you that's balanced and within the guidelines of what the town council has voted. So we'll play with the cards that were dealt.
Well, I'll give you one more opportunity to speak, and then we actually have to figure out some date setting, or at least react to some potential dates that are all related to the budget. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I will try to go fast, but I've got a couple thoughts. All right. So gonna go in order. First, is this plan for this year only in the sense that financial guidelines are created every year? I am intending that this would be added to, that any additions would be to the base, because I don't see that there is an inflated need this year that's going to go away next year. So the changes that I am pitching would be to the base. With the exception of the idea of the possible idea. After 1 p.m., my words start to do the jumbles. The possibility of that bridge grant for elementary school funds. So yes, this does create a new base, and my belief is that we need a new base. I do not believe that our current base is equitably equitable. So one of the things that was brought up was, or that was said was, we're not fully seeing the impact of the cuts on the municipal side. And I agree. And that's part of what I'm asking Paul and Melissa is kind of, what is that picture? We don't get our budget in the same way that the school committee gets to look at theirs. And I think that it's something that has put us at a disadvantage in terms of knowing how to talk about our own budget. Andy mentioned the impact of federal cuts means we shouldn't put, he gave the example of the library at risk. I mean, the state is projected to lose $2 billion in school funding if DOE closes. I don't think we can ignore federal cuts on any of these departments, and I don't think that we can weigh them in a heightened way. The federal cuts are going to devastate all of these organizations. This is not something that one group is exempted from. Paul is creating a budget with a 500,000 deficit. We need to know what that means. I agree. Paul, if you can tell us, that would be great. Okay, sorry. So I'm trying to go fast. If the impact of financing increases, Something that got mentioned a lot was the impact of changes close to the deadline. Yep, agreed. This is not ideal timing. This is when we've kind of gotten the clear picture on what things are shaking out to be. But we also have had increases that have caused budgets to have to shift multiple times this year. And so I'd like to know what people were considering when it was that initial 3% and then 3.5% and now 4%. When we look at those changes, those have come in and people have adapted. Obviously, it's harder to reduce, but there was a plan. There was going to be a plan for 3% initially. What happened to that? If we alter the policy of saving for the capital fund, we need to know the impact on the financing model for it. Yes, and I'm curious if the finance committee had that discussion when you were creating the financial guidelines and talked about budgeting less conservatively and having the idea of having less left, quote unquote, left over at the end of the year. And I'd love to know what that conversation landed on. Federal impacts I talked about. Okay, so the topic was brought up a few times that giving even increases keeps the different areas from fighting. And I gotta say, well, Bernie, was Bernie gone? We lost Bernie. Anyway, while I am sure this has been worse in other places, I don't think that any of us could sit here and say that that's not currently happening. All you have to do is listen to the public forums. All you have to do is listen to our constituents. All you have to do is listen to our different bodies. This is happening right now. We are not a peaceful, in a peaceful existence here. And I think we're kidding ourselves to say that we are. So, well, yes, I'm sure it could get worse if we were having every single person have to justify every single line. I do not think we should be living under the disillusion that what we're doing is working and creating a peaceful cohabitation between these different areas. And then I'm going to get back to this. Okay, so I just wrote, we are in a very weird place, and I'm not sure why. All right. But that pact, basically that pact we made has already been broken. Kathy, you had mentioned that you'd only consider this if we find the funds and not by reducing the percentage to the other areas. And I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts on exactly where we would get it. You know, I think you had mentioned freezing open positions in a certain department, but then also saying that you didn't want to reduce the percentage going to the municipal. And so I'm not clear that that would free up any money for the schools, if I'm understanding you correctly. We don't want to take away from the 4% because someone said we don't want to take away from the 4% because of the rising costs such as insurance and don't want to cut positions. Yeah, neither do the schools. Like they're hitting these insurance numbers too. We can't keep acting like we're this completely separate entity that's navigating these massive challenges that no one else is navigating, like insurance costs. The comment was made that we can't go to the state and say we have a problem that's massive and then fix it. There is no world where we fix this. I want to be really clear. I can write an incredible pitch and I can get 7, 9, how many do I need to agree with me? I'm still not going to be able to find enough money to close that gap. There's no world where that happens. So what I don't understand is why we need to sacrifice our students and teachers fully year over year to prove to the state we have a problem. That's not helping our town. That's not helping our community. We should try to fix what we can and communicate the impact to our state legislators and our governor on what is happening. The impact of that on what is happening. Mandy, I agree that the ways that the different entities communicate is different. And honestly, I don't think that our lack of clear communication of the impact of cuts should be what benefits us in these discussions. We need to be able to look at that comparison. I'm almost done, I promise. The last thing, talking about bridging funding for schools, I've requested those numbers. I don't think they have them yet, but I've requested them even as a minimum number for what minimum cost savings there might be. I'm trying to get that for you. And then, Paul, you said you're not sure how we're going to close that $500,000 gap. And, or sorry, what were you going to do when it was 3%? Like what was it going to be when we were facing these much lower numbers?
Worse.
Right.
It was
So
worse. It was worse. Anna.
I understand that. That's super clear. But I mean, again, when we started this process, we were looking at a more aggressive plan. We needed to have a more aggressive plan for cuts. Last thing I want to say, two things left. So it gets mentioned a lot that the council are the fiscal stewards and set long range goals, but that's actually councils are fiscal stewards, but long range goals, long range planning is under the purview of BCG per the charter. The way that BCG is described in the charter, and I've got it up so I can read it because I don't want to remember it wrong. But if you go minimize the screen,
So,
please.
Anna, you really need, I need to.
Kathy, I got asked questions for about 30 minutes and didn't have a chance to respond. I'd like to be able to answer people if that's okay. This is my second to last thing. What the BCG is supposed to do is they are supposed to review the financial condition of the town, revenue and expenditure forecasts, other relevant information from the town manager in order to develop coordinated budget guidelines and calendar and coordinate the process of budget development. It shouldn't be finance who's doing those splits. It should be BCG. The last thing I want to say, I heard all of you, and I really appreciate the thought that you're putting into this, and I'm going to try to make sure that I incorporate all of this into whatever proposal ends up coming out of all of this conversation. But what I would love to shift to is a mindset of how might we, instead of here are all the reasons why this is going to be hard or not work. I think we've really been approaching all of this as clutching our territory, clutching what we're used to, and clutching what we know from the years past. And I think we really need to try to reset and look at this as how might we try to balance these needs and not have one area hurting so much more. All of us are going to hurt this year. That is the reality of where we're at. Thanks. I'm done now.
Okay, so Anna is done, and I did schedule this as a discussion. I didn't think I had scheduled it as a debate, so I just, with one person doing point and the other doing counterpoint. So in any case, we had a full discussion. I just want to pull up, I think, two things on the calendar. One, I sent you, we posted a calendar initially that focused mainly on how would handle May, and just an explanation of what is in May, through looking at two council committees and how they meet. It's set up so that on Thursday, which would be the extra day in the month of May, that we meet twice a week, it alternates between a morning time and an afternoon time. And that seemed to work for everyone on the finance committee, and it worked for the counselors that are on these two other committees. So that's just, just wanted to give an explanation on why it wasn't consistently 4 to 6 on the Thursday. So it was set up to vary. We will wait for the town to tell us which departments come when, and it's still going to be set up that each person says, I'll take that department. The clusters seem to make sense to people, and then we'll find out what order we're discussing them. And then that will be the report. Right now, education, both regional and elementary, are in that discussion loop, because unless the council votes to separate out regional, we will have region come with us on May 1st with the whole budget from the town manager. So what I want to show on the screen is Lynn sent this morning when do we do what on the budget. And the big issue is the council will be looking at the regional budget on next Monday, the 24th of March, and referring it to finance. And the next finance committee would be on the 1st. So we will have a meeting on the 1st, by the way. It's no longer optional. The issue is, how long do we want to, if it gets referred, that assumes we've split it out, that the council votes to split it out for a separate discussion. If we get it on the 1st, Lynn tentatively wanted to schedule a hearing and a decision on the 7th, of April, when the council's meeting, and that doesn't give us enough time. So our next meeting would be April 15th. And the question is, could the council schedule another meeting when they don't have a meeting, the week of the school break meeting, and it's also Patriots Day, the week that starts April 19th. Could there be a council meeting in there if we want to move the regional budget and take a vote on it? So there isn't enough time in what Lynn proposed to us for the Finance Committee to have a long discussion, come back, write a report, and get it back to the council. And I personally don't think it's a good idea to do a hearing on the budget and make a decision the same night. I think we need to do a hearing. So this is what was proposed to us, and I'm going to be meeting with Paul tomorrow on what is possible and with Lynn. So the schedule, and this is all, the schedule is, what's the new piece in it is when do we do the regional budget? And when do we do the hearing? When does the Finance Committee do, so should we add another meeting in April? We're meeting twice, we could meet 3 times. And part of the acceleration in this, this document is to try to get the town of Amherst to make a decision on region before the other towns go to their town meetings. You know, so if we are not voting positively on what was recommended to us from the regional school committee, they're going to need to know that was the thoughts. So the issue really is on what do we think we can do as a committee? And just so everyone remembers, I'm not here on the 1st, so Bob will be chairing on April 1st, but I am back for April 15th. I'm actually back the week before. So I just want to see what Mandy's hand is up, and Paul has looked at this a lot. So Mandy, just reactions to this so we can give feedback on what we think we can do as a committee. Finance is in charge of holding the hearing. I mean, we could separately hold the hearing. It doesn't have to be with the council. So Mandy, so this is, I think, is it large enough for everyone to read? Maybe make it a little bit bigger, Melissa. The critical decisions are all in April. So Mandy, go ahead.
So a couple of thoughts. I think this document as written has a lot of problems. It puts finance meetings on days we don't even have finance scheduled because we're 1 and 3, and it puts them on 2 and 4. Like the water and sewer rates, we don't have a finance meeting scheduled then, and I'm not sure why they need to be done in April when we're not voting on them till the end of June. You know, like I just don't think it's a reasonable schedule that has paid attention to our conversations. It's missing the budget hearing on the overall budget at all. So I have a couple of proposals that I would like the committee to consider. If and all of this, we don't know whether the council will vote to consider the regional budget separately, but if it does, and this is where something becomes a problem, consider holding the public hearing on the regional budget on March 31st. However, that would need to be noticed by basically the end of this week because it requires a 10-day notice. If it's held on, it can be held on April 7th, but I think then our council agenda needs to plan on at least 2 hours of public hearing when setting that agenda. It's going, I think we just have to expect a long public hearing, and I don't know what else is intended to be considered on April 7th. I know University Drive is set for that day. I am concerned about putting the public hearings for the budgets on regular council meeting evenings this year. So I would really ask us to consider putting, if we have to hold 2 because the council separates, potentially preemptively noticing a March 31st. And I name Monday nights because many of us probably have those Mondays free that aren't council meetings. A March 31st public hearing for that can always be canceled if the council does not decide to take up the regional budget separately. We need a public hearing on the main budget. I propose that we do that on May 12th. Again, another date that is not a council meeting on a Monday in May. I'm proposing those dates at 6:30 because I feel like we need to be holding these public hearings in the evening, not during our 2 to 4 finance committee times, and it is finance's role to hold those hearings. I do think that April 7th for a vote at the council is too quick. I don't think it's a reasonable ask of finance to hold one meeting and have a report on this, or report out, which is required by the charter, on the day of the public hearing. It's just not reasonable or appropriate. We could add an April 8th, or we have an April 15th meeting. We could potentially add an April 8th. I know that doesn't help you, Kathy, because I think that's still a problem for attending. So in some sense, I would recommend maybe switching our April 1st date, or an April 8th one, to March 24th, if hold that in case, or have it noticed in case the regional budget is voted at the council as being considered separately, so that our chair can attend at least one of those conversations. So I would request that maybe we add a March 24th finance committee meeting. I think the council, if the goal is to have the council vote, again, it all depends. We don't know what the council's going to do next Monday. Prior to any of the other 3 towns' town meetings, then we need to have the council polled by our clerk of the council now, to see when on the week of April 21st the council can meet and get everyone together. Because I think finance is going to need that time. And I say that because I don't know what the manager is going to propose as the financial order. But no matter what he proposes, whether it meets our guidelines and doesn't meet the regional school committee's budget, or whether it meets the regional school committee budget or not our guidelines, I'm going to need more information about the rest of the budget. I cannot consider a regional budget in silo, because I need to know the effects on the rest, the other 2/3 of the operational budget. And so you can't do that in one day. You have to be able to ask the questions, and our manager and our finance director, they don't have to have their budget until May 1. So I know they're still working on it, and that's going to be a fluid conversation. So I think if the council decides to do this, the council needs to schedule another meeting the week of the 21st. And I know the 21st is not available because it's a state holiday, but the council needs to schedule one so that we can fit at least 3 finance committee meetings in, because we might need 3. I just remember last year when we tried to have this discussion without an actual financial order referral, and it took all of April and we still weren't done. This is going to be just as hard and just as involved, and we're going to need 3 finance meetings, and we're going to need the council to probably schedule another one if it wants to. Otherwise, it can plan on a vote on the April 28th meeting, which is still before one of the 3 other towns' town meetings. Those are my thoughts.
So, Paul, I know.
So I'll be quick. So I want to reemphasize what Mandy said, that the budget that was voted by the regional school committee is out of alignment with the council's guidelines. What I give you, I believe, should be in alignment with the council's guidelines. So what I give you as the recommended regional school district budget is, I'm still working through that. And the second piece is, one of the reasons we tried to expedite this is the school administration had asked the council, if you're going to not approve the regional assessment method or the budget, please do that as soon as possible, because the town meetings for the other 3 towns are difficult to adjust, and they're looking at times and notifications and things like that. And we're trying to be sensitive to their needs as well. So I think that was one of the reasons. But I think your Councilor Haneke is absolutely right. This is not a simple year. It's a very complex year. So and there's an interplay between all 4 of the budget line items. So whether we can accommodate the school district or not is a real question. But I think that's something Kathy and you and Lynn and I can discuss some more tomorrow, and Melissa.
And Paul, if what Mandy just suggested this is for trying to make decisions tomorrow or come back with a revised. If we were special council meeting on April 22nd, because Monday's Patriot Day, is that in time enough for the town meetings? Or just have a pure,
I think the first town meeting is until later, but I think one of the concerns obviously is that that's school vacation week, which historically the town has avoided important school discussions and votes on during school vacation week. That doesn't mean you can't. I just want to.
right. So I was just asking just purely on timeline because yeah, okay. And Mandy's hand is up. And any other reactions? I mean, we can add a meeting if people are willing to on finance. I mean, May is then in front of us, but I think we can't do it on an accelerated schedule that's doing hearings and writing reports and voting on the same day. We have to have time to, just so I think people know, the only thing we have right now is kind of a single sheet of paper. We don't have everything that went into that budget. We haven't had any opportunity to ask questions about it on necessity versus wants. I did listen to the regional school committee discussion on Friday night, and there is some leeway within the schools to come in with a lower budget. They had an option that had a lower budget. So, I mean, so it isn't cut and dried that this is the only thing that was before them. So I think we need time to be able to ask questions and have information in front of us before we make a recommendation to the council. So Mandy.
I want to thank Paul for the additional information regarding what either the school committee or the communications he's had with the school departments on what their request of Amherst is. Given that information, I still don't know how the council will vote on Monday, but I think it's imperative that we potentially notice a public hearing on the budget because the charter requires 10 days notice from the date for if this committee is okay, March 31st in the evening, 6:37, I don't know, pick a time. Because that needs done this week, because otherwise you can't hold the hearing basically until April 7th or 8th then. Whereas if it's held March 31st, there's more of a possibility than that the finance committee could potentially have a recommendation by April 7, but certainly by maybe then the 15th, which would need to still be a new special town council meeting, because I know we don't have a meeting scheduled for April 15th, but it would pull it out of school vacation week. But if that hearing is April 7th, I don't see how the finance committee can meet April 7 or even April 15. The hearing needs to be earlier. And so I would highly recommend considering scheduling the hearing for not next week, because 10 days is that, but the week after sometime. And my recommendation is just Monday night, because it's a typical night for counselors to meet. And so I feel like we'd probably be able to get a quorum on that night. But
I did, Mandy, and what you just said, if we have a scheduled meeting for April 15th, and if we can get a report out and there was a council meeting after that, we could avoid that next vacation week. Paul, I mean, this is just for tomorrow's discussion. It requires a lot of work on our half. I write pretty quickly if I know what I'm supposed to write, but I draft pretty quickly, but I don't think this is going to be an easy conversation on where we end up going. I see Holly's hand is up.
You're muted.
Muted, Holly.
I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask a silly question here. So if I'm understanding correctly, there will be a public hearing on the regional school committee recommendation, the elementary school recommendation, and so there'll be 3 that
No.
have to happen. Are we putting the cart before the horse when we don't even know what the 3 budgets are yet?
No, it would just be if regional comes out of cycle, regional, and then the whole budget, Holly.
The whole
Okay.
budget would include the elementary school.
Would
So there
include the
two.
elementary. There
There would
wouldn't, there's
be
not a
two.
separate one on elementary.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was
No, the
very
way this is
confused
written,
there.
it looks like, it's more like, when are we gonna see elementary? But it goes,
Right, we don't even have a
right, it's gonna
giant
be,
piece of the picture
it'll
yet
be in
to-
the, elementary will be in the regular cycle. They will be scheduled for a day in May, and be part of the
part of the
public
town's
hearing on
budget
the whole
hearing.
budget, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
So I see it's a little bit after 4, well, although we started late because of technical linkages. So I'm not seeing any objection to Mandy's suggestion of a way if the council can schedule other meetings, maybe we can fit ourselves to the task that will be assigned to us. And Bob as co-chair or vice chair, whatever we call, you're gonna, when I'm not there, I can make where I'm going to be, if it's 6:30 at night here, I can actually probably be at that meeting because it'll only be midnight where I am, but I can't make a meeting during the day. So you're going to be chairing some of these pieces where we're actually deliberating. So it's just, and I had said, maybe we don't need April 1st. We do need April 1st. And we definitely April 15th. So the other thing is maybe we add another meeting, and Mandy has suggested where we could do hearings. So the rest of it is just May, and with beautiful colors to show you that there's Thursday's been added in May. So Mandy, what I would propose is once I talk with Paul and Lynn tomorrow on what Lynn thinks is possible with the council on scheduling and whether they're going to do your suggestion of post a hearing on the 31st, I'll get everyone back a potential plan. And then since we can't deliberate by email, we just figure out how we deal with, do people agree with that schedule or not? Does that work for people as a way of communicating? Because we're not due to meet again until April 1st. But if there's a hearing, finance needs to be doing that hearing on March 31st. So that adds time for the finance committee members if we do March 31st. So it's not a full meeting, but it is sitting there in a hearing. Mandy, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I guess I'm proposing adding a March 25th. Is it next Tuesday meeting too? Because then for just the regional budget, it would then potentially take place before the hearing. So that the committee can have a conversation before the hearing. And this all presumes that the council's going to separate them, but I don't know, right?
Okay, I missed that. So if we, is there anyone who could not do that March 25th? We're missing Bernie and we're missing Alicia. I certainly can. And again, we'll get back to people if that's set. And the only topic would be the regional budget.
Yeah, as a special meeting.
And then I think we should pose some questions, send them in advance. So when they come in, we have documents in front of us that we can be looking at. Paul?
Yeah, I think actually you'd have the regional assessment method as well, which you could do instead of or in addition to.
Yeah. So the assessment method would be for
that's sort of the key document from the school district's point of view, I believe.
Yep. No, and I think we just need to see what I call the big budget document that shows, where all of this is coming from with some of this, the one we usually see, and now we've got it down to one page of pay us. But anyway, I'll just get a list and make sure I haven't missed anything on piece, but it is absolutely the assessment method.
And I guess the other question I had, why I originally raised my hand before I had that thought and that statement there, is this document in the packet? Because I hadn't seen this updated one. So Clearly
Yep.
it exists. Could we get it emailed to us so I can just start putting things in?
Sure.
This one was in the packet last week. The one from the council was just put in earlier today.
No, this one has times on it. The one I had didn't have times on it.
Yeah, no, I sent you an updated one. I'll just
Okay, I
send it.
must have missed it. Sorry. Okay.
No, if it's not in there, it might be because I didn't flag that I had changed it, Mandy, because I in between those Thursdays, I came up with specific times and I looked at TSO and
Yeah.
CRC to figure out what the alternating dates were, and I think I got them right.
Okay.
On mornings and afternoons.
Yeah, if this could just be sent out to us, that would be
Yeah, I'll
great.
send it
Thank
out.
you.
This is on my computer and it'll come to you as a Word document, which makes it easy to work on. Anything else? So we've got a proposal for an extra meeting on March 25th of just finance, just on regional. If Paul and Lynn agree, a March 31st hearing, which would have finance at the table on the hearing and the council.
Sorry, I had one other comment on this calendar itself.
Okay.
November 11th is a federal holiday, so it cannot be an alternative.
Okay, and I looked at that and I said, wait a minute, that's a holiday also. So the 4th
Yeah.
is election and we usually don't have meetings on the election. So maybe Mandy, just send me on what then should we do? Do we shift to a Wednesday or what do we do? Since I saw, and once we get to November, we need the time because that's when guidelines are being done. Yeah,
We could pop it a week earlier,
Okay.
October 28th.
okay,
And then I would recommend not putting any meetings in January because there won't be committees by then at all, since it's a completely new council.
okay,
The committees don't sort of, unlike this past year where the committees sort of could meet until a new one was appointed, you've got whole new swearing ins going on.
okay. So I'm going to revise it that rather than that blue, add October and do then the next one is November 18th. Last year, I think, Bob, you had to add one more meeting to get through guidelines, is what I'm remembering.
Yeah, we had to add some in either November or December, I think early December. But we got screwed up because Thanksgiving was very late last year.
That's great. Melissa just changed it. That's perfect. And then wipe out January. Okay, thank you. Thank everyone for staying with us until it's 4:09. So I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
And going around the room, Kathy is a yes. Mandy?
Aye.
Bob?
aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Tom?
In support.
And so it's unanimous with 2 people absent. Thank you all for in my opinion, a fairly intense meeting. So thank you very much. And
Thanks.
I'll draft a report as fast as I can around CPAC and send it around for everyone for comments. And the council meets on Monday night and today is Tuesday. Potentially it can be in the council packet then. And
Want me
then
to
Lincoln.
send this to everybody, Kathy, or just to you because you want to edit it more?
Well, I think you can if you send them the Word version,
Mhm.
Melissa, and then everyone can take a look at it. Because
Okay,
I'm not going to make any more changes than the ones you just did.
okay.
That would be great. So we are adjourned at 4:10. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.